On this episode of Travels with Bill, we're in Regina, Saskatchewan at one of my favorite places. In fact, it's a favorite place for a lot of kids because driving by the Coop Refinery complex gives you an opportunity to see lights and steam and hear the noise. Of course, kids love that sort of thing. I'm not immune to that either. I always begged to be driven by here when we were in Regina. During the day it's okay, but the refinery comes alive at night with all the lights. We're going to show you some of that and learn a little bit more about this Regina institution. In the 1930s, horses were quickly giving way to petroleum-fueled tractors, and as petroleum use increased, farmers looked for ways to reduce their costs. Co-ops were part of that. They were formed at Millstone, Wilcox, Sherwood, Moose Jaw, and many other places, including Rollo, which is famous for something totally else. But in 1933, the Canadian government established a tariff of 3.7 cents a gallon on gasoline imported from the United States. That made things, not so good for farmers. Co-ops turned to small independent refiners at Coots in Alberta and Moose Jaw in Saskatchewan. But as the year progressed, the independent refiners were bought up by the major oil companies, and the wholesale price of gasoline was raised 2 cents a gallon. What were co-ops to do? Well, what they always do, try to band together to make things better. 8 farmers got together and raised $32,000 to create their own refinery. Now, the refinery wasn't big enough to do everything, but it was a start. And in the very first year of operations, the plant had sales of $253,000 and achieved savings of $30,000. That's almost all of the initial investment in the refinery made back in just 1 year. From the very beginning, at 11 o'clock in the morning on May 27, 1935, what is now this huge complex has been fueling Western Canada. By 1939, a contract was signed to build a cracking plant that would increase the yield of gasoline and expand production to 1,500 barrels a day of crude oil. By 1951, another expansion, now 5,000 barrels a day. In 1954, a $1.7 million expansion doubled production to 12,000 barrels a day. And in 1974, production had grown all the way to 28,000 barrels a day. A new expansion was planned which would bring capacity up to 50,000 barrels a day. Well, you fast forward all the way to current time, which is 2022 when we're filming this video. The refinery complex now processes over 130,000 barrels a day of crude oil. That oil makes a lot of products, including asphalt, propane, and of course, diesel and gasoline. So much diesel and gasoline, in fact, that 17 million liters a day are distributed from this facility into the co-op retail system to more than 600 retail locations across Western Canada, where that fuel goes into your vehicles and, of course, just like the first day, into farmers' tractors. The co-op system provides rebates on much of that fuel, and it's not uncommon these days to see 7, 8, maybe even 9 cents a liter rebated back to co-op members for supporting the co-op system, which starts at the gas pump but works its way back to this refinery. More than 900 people work at the refinery complex, and it occupies 800 acres of land. It certainly is something to see. When you come to Regina, it's probably best to visit at night. That's when the lights are so amazing and you can see it best. During the day it looks good too, but at night is when it shines. Probably the best way to do this is to take Ring Road until Winnipeg Street. Turn off of that and go up to 9th Avenue, then follow 9th Avenue along. It's going to feel like you're driving right through the middle of the refinery. You're really not. You're on the edge of it, and 9th Avenue is a public street. But on one side you'll see a lot of the loading facilities, on the other side you'll see a lot of the refinery. 9th Street comes up to what is Highway 46 or McDonald Street. You can turn on that and go along the refinery. Once you run out of it, of course, pull a U-turn and then come on back and drive all through it again. I promise, your kids are going to love it. Of course, adults may love it too, because loud, noisy things really do it for guys. There's been some trouble at the refinery. A labor dispute took some time to resolve, but outside of labor issues, there's also been some explosions and fires and unfortunately even some accidents too. On the 6th of October 2011, an explosion occurred in the diesel processing area that sent 7 people to hospital. Eventually, the refinery was fined $280,000 as part of that. In 2013, another major incident. A fire in the coker of the heavy oil upgrader section of the plant shortly after midnight resulted in no injuries. Then in 2013, another incident, a fire and explosion. That could be felt throughout the entire city. No injuries were reported though, and refinery staff were accounted for, so they kind of got away with it. My favorite story is from March of 2016, and it involves the railway track. A lot of product here gets loaded on rail, including asphalt. Well, on that particular night, around midnight, an asphalt car left the plant. But it wasn't supposed to. It was a runaway, and it rolled uncontrolled several kilometers through the city of Regina. To make matters worse, the Coop Refinery failed to tell Regina Protective Services or the city that the incident occurred. It wasn't until the media reported on it that those that should have known found out. Well, it doesn't make people too happy, does it? Interesting thing, though, about cars rolling uncontrolled through a city is it didn't hit anybody. We don't know if the protection worked at all the crossings, but you assume it did, so the chances are some people saw a very interesting sight as the lights went on, the arms came down, and one car rolled on by, and then just carried off into the night. We're filming at dusk. That's because we want to show you the lights, but also see the superstructure as well. If it was much darker, and we'll give you a shot of that here at the end, you wouldn't see everything. Much lighter, you wouldn't see the lights. So it's kind of the perfect time of night to take a look at the refinery. You can see some of Regina stretching out there in the distance. Regina is not the biggest city in the world, but it certainly has everything you want. We've got some other videos about Regina on the channel, and some of the things you could do here besides just looking at an oil refinery. Here's a shot from a little later at night where you can't see the structure as well, but you certainly get a better view of what those lights look like. Well, that does it for now from Regina, Saskatchewan at the Coop Refinery. We'll see you next time on the next episode of Travels with Bill.